All right. And while we're waiting for folks to join, why don't you introduce yourself in the chat feature. Just let us know your name, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from.
Let's get started and see when more folks are going to join in soon.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you having you here tonight with us. So my name is Cristian Solano Cordova, and I'm the Communications Director at the National Partnership for New Americans. And I'll be co-facilitating this session here with my colleague Andres, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Andres Bautista, and I use he, they pronouns. I'm the digital organizer with We All America.
All right, welcome everybody. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Quick overview of what we'll be covering in this training today. So we're gonna be doing a quick poll to see what your experience with digital organizing is. And basically this is gonna be a crash course on how to build a digital toolkit. So, you know, IDing your audience and building value-based messaging for a toolkit, creating a social media strategy, and then making and scheduling content. We'll also be touching on earned media and how that interacts with a digital toolkit. How you can include, you know, earned media elements in your toolkit, or also once you get some earned media, you can leverage that media for a digital toolkit. Ooh, wrong way. All right. So first of all, let us know in the chat, what's your experience with digital organizing? Do you have much experience with it at all? Or if you don't, what do you think digital organizing is? I'll give everyone a minute here.
There's also no wrong answers. Okay, so I see Bosman dropped in that she organized full state advocacy days last year virtually. That's really impressive. Anahita as well has helped with organizing online the advocacy days. Okay, so folks are just trying to learn more as well. Okay, awesome. Well, let's get started. And so I know that most folks may not have too much formal experience with digital organizing, but given this pandemic, a lot of us have been already digitally organizing our communities. I also see some comments right here about making Zoom calls as well. So all that stuff, all those techniques that we've been using virtually is very similar to what we do online. So when it comes to digital organizing, we can all jump in. We all have different level of experiences. For a lot of us digital organizers, we started off as regular organizers, and through trial and error, we've kind of learned about this job hands-on. So for me, on the next slide, sorry. Oh, sorry, before then is, so when it comes to like digital organizing, there we go. When it comes to digital organizing, some things that have helped me become a better organizer has been learning through my own experiences. So again, like through trial and error, but it has also been through really putting time into best practices. It's going to guide you a lot. They're going to go a really long way. So I'm also going to pass it off to Chris and see what other wisdoms he has.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andres. So I first got involved in digital organizing because I was working as a communications manager at my previous organization. And I wanted to create complementary strategies to organize our organize for our pro-immigrant and refugee policy goals. And what's helped me become a better digital organizer has been to use all the data that we have at our disposal to inform our strategies. As you know, Facebook has a ton of information about you and I, and as managers of those Facebook pages, we don't have access to all of that information, but we do have access to a lot of demographic information from our pages and what posts people interact with. And so getting some of that data back really helps like inform, what messages do the best or what images do the best, or what tactics are the best to employ. So tactics like, an online petition, that's a digital organizing strategy, right? Or Zoom calls can be a digital strategy, or combine all of the above into like a big campaign. So yeah, in this webinar, we'll be covering the creation process of a digital toolkit, which is like a staple of digital organizing, that you can put a lot of different tools into it and pass it along to a lot of different organizations, and then create movement online. Even if we can't all meet, or organize people from across the country, we can all take action together. And ultimately, that's what kind of a movement is about, right? Like coordinated action for maximum impact. And I'll hand it back to you, Andres.
Definitely. So let's get started on the toolkit creation process. Next slide, please. Awesome. So since digital organizing is a massive field, today we're just going to narrow in and focus on the main tool that digital organizers use. So something that we're often requested to make includes toolkits. This is something that when I was first starting off as a digital organizer, this was kind of like my introduction to digital organizing. So I thought this was a good starting point because it encompasses multiple skills that we need in order to build a successful campaign online. So today we're going to take you step by step on how to build the perfect toolkit and what you can do as well. So let's get into more details. Like, what is a toolkit? How many folks here have built toolkits before? I'm kind of curious if anyone here has. If you have, drop in the chat. Okay, so I'm seeing that on Akita, Christian, yeah. Pierre, okay. Yeah, no worries. So it seems like some folks are familiar with toolkits, and other folks, it's still kind of new for them, but that's okay. This is why we're here. We're going to guide you step by step. So what is a toolkit? So a toolkit is a document that contains information and resources to push out and amplify a campaign or cause. You probably have seen them before in your email box. Oftentimes they'll have graphics, they'll have captions for social media, talking points, and additional resources and links. So when it comes to toolkits, the reason they're created is to mobilize our supporters, advocates, and partner organizations. And these are usually distributed via email, such as Google Groups, or through text. And essentially, this is going to be a messaging guide. So when you create your toolkit, you need to think about your target audience, and then you need to think strategically about how you're going to reach that target audience using all those elements I mentioned beforehand. So the main anatomy, as mentioned, is going to be the summary purpose, talking points, social media captions, hashtags, visual assets, and metrics. And we're going to go a little bit into detail about some of the main components again. So let's start off with talking about our audience. So I'll pass it off to Chris.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I think it's not just for digital toolkits. I think this also comes in really handy just in communications in general, identifying who your audience is, what they care about, and then you can build messages that line up with what they already care about, and hopefully inspire them to take some sort of action, whether that be sign a petition, attend a Zoom meeting, or show up in person to the Capitol to do like an in-person advocacy day. So let's go ahead and wrong way. Let's just kind of do a quick overview of what strategies are to identify your audience. So I think most people think, when they think of like, when I first started as an activist, I was like, oh, I just want the general public to understand what, it's like to be an undocumented immigrant. But in reality, like, there is no such thing as a general audience. Like, it really, when you look at it closer and closer, like, audiences break up into like smaller and smaller and smaller segments until eventually you get an audience of one, right? And we don't have enough like granularity, enough information to like target for every individual, but you can target communities and different populations based on a bunch of different characteristics. So a good place to begin is just to get an overview of where your organization is at already, right? A good way to figure out what your audience is to look at your social media channels. If Paul or Pierre, does your organization have Facebook or Twitter? Great. So, that's a good starting place. You can look at who your organization is already engaging, right? And your organization already has plenty of supporters, whether it's on your email listserv, customer relationship management system or CRM, or your website. Like, you can get a lot of information from all of those sources. And all you have to do is, do a little bit of analysis, or plug that information into some of these tools online that can help you with that analysis. And we'll go a little bit more into detail on Hootsuite at the end of our presentation, which has some of this like analysis information. But some methods to use with your social media account provide a glimpse into who you're already engaging online, what kind of content they're engaging with on your pages. And similarly, you can install a tracker on your website to give you that information about how many people are accessing your website, which pages they visit. And in some cases, you can even get demographic information, meaning like gender, age, location, which are like really important when it ends up coming down to like how to target certain people, right? Like a voter in one state, let's say Texas, is going to care about a lot of very different things compared to a voter in California. And that's just, based off of geographic location. And you can make even more kind of determinations based on these other factors like age, gender, and other kind of data points that you can use. And for deeper dives, you can also be super intentional to create surveys. And you can send that out to, your audience on your email list or your Facebook, and that can provide you some really valuable insight. You can put that up on your website as well, and just ask about their demographics and their interests and, how they're connected to your organization, right? Because like a donor is going to have different values and priorities than like an activist in your community, or a elected official that cares about your issue is going to have just a different they're engaging with the organization in a different way. And so you want to just figure out how they're already engaging, and then ask them specifically, like, why do you care about this issue, or what issues do you care about? So that leads me into like having one-on-ones. Just one-on-one meetings with people can provide a lot of valuable information, especially with like donors. If you want to mobilize donors, like, this is a good way to go about it. And yeah, you can even do like a focus group, which is kind of like a big, like a one-on-one, but with a bunch of different people, ask a bunch of these questions and get a lot of feedback in person. I see someone else joining. And yeah, Andres, so I know you were talking about some of these data analytic tools that we can use. Would you mind talking about these tools that you use for We're All America?
Yeah, so something that I did recently actually for our Giving Tuesday toolkit has been going through and looking at our Twitter audience. And something that I did was use a third-party source, which taking down the information of everyone who's following our page, it actually constructed a profile with their personality. So on this example, it shows the report where it shows that the type of emojis that they use, the type of imagery that they like, some type of branding that they like, wording, style, aesthetics, etc. And then it also showed some of their top favorite social media networks. So all this information is good for me to know because it helps me narrow down about who my audience is. So instead of going from the big general audience of everyone, and then kind of narrowing down to, okay, we're looking into refugee and immigrant supporters, but now we're really going to be narrowing it in even further about what their interests are like, and things that we can connect on shared values as well. So that's kind of what this information helps provide. And some of these services are free to use as well.
Thanks, Andres. That's super useful. I actually didn't know about this audience analysis here on the left side of the screen, and I'll have to give that a try. So that kind of takes us into, where'd it go? Oh, some messaging. So I actually, Andres, I don't know if you want to touch on this first or if you want to touch on this afterward.
Yeah, we can actually circle back because it's kind of related. So yeah, we can go first into the messaging.
Okay. So yeah, first I wanted to show everybody this kind of this quick video. Basically, the concept of value-based messaging. So providing a approach that's based on the values of your audience to create messages. And at this point, your social media analysis should give you some insight into who your audience is and what motivates them. So I wanted to show y'all this quick video just on the power of values-based messaging. So I'm gonna plug this in real quick. Oh, and actually I think I have to share my screen differently for sound. So give me 1 second. All right, can y'all see everything?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Her name was Ariel Black, a mild-mannered social justice advocate who believed that cold, hard facts alone could change the world. Until she confronted a powerful supervillain named the Mindset, who had locked people's minds into boxes of fear, making them impervious to facts.
Gay welfare queen from Mexico has laid herself up by your bootstraps.
How can we get through to people?
But then one day, in a freak printing press accident that unleashed the voices of revolutionary thinkers and leaders from the past.
Wait a sec. What's happening to me?
Ariel was given the power to transform the discourse, reconnecting us to our shared values.
Whoa. This is badass. Take that, dominant narrative. Oh yeah, now we're talking.
She's got the power to flip the script and free your mind. She is Helvetica Bold.
The mindset is about to get reset.
Remember, stay tuned and be bold.
All right. So it's kind of a fun little video. And, it kind of goes into the psychology of this, like what actually motivates people. And I think when it comes down to some issues that become very politically polarized, people end up just backing up into their corner of their like in-group versus out-group. And it forces people to it doesn't matter what the facts are anymore. It matters whether they're right or wrong. Or like their group is right or wrong. And so basically, we want to bypass that kind of tribal group mentality, the in-group and out-group mentality, by reconnecting people to values that everybody shares, right? And I think ultimately our goal, in a lot of our movements is to bring people together. as opposed to the forces in our society that are pushing people apart, right, and being divisive. And so this values-based messaging framework is super helpful to kind of hijack our psychology and bypass those kind of tribal thinking patterns that are innate to every human being, right? So here's a quick kind of overview of what this is. So leading with values creates like broad points of agreement.
Krista, you're showing the outline.
Oh, sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay. How about now?
You're good. Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, basically it connects us to like points of agreement that everybody can get behind, and shared goals that resonate with a lot of different people across our audiences, right? And of course, you know, the more specific you get, the more powerful kind of that message becomes. But also having broad values helps bring in a broad, number of people into your orbit. And then being explicit about the problem and how it threatens those shared values creates a sense of urgency and creates that person and their story to the broader systems that are impacting real human beings. And then that's why we're here as activists, right? We're here offering solutions that gives those audiences a sense of hope and motivates them. And the solutions are connected directly to the problem that we present, and we make it clear where the responsibility for change lies, right? So, I mean, you know, typically it's like an elected official or like the change maker, right? Where the responsibility for change lies, but there's also some responsibility in us as individuals to like push those people that are the change makers, they're the decision makers, I mean. And then assigning an action that gives the audience a concrete next step of what they can do to fix this wrong. So I give an example here, you know, and I bolded it and color coded it so you can tell where in the little message the different kind of parts of the framework are. So let's start with the value. Everyone should have equitable access to the voting booth. Yet, you know, this number of counties in my state, and this is a problem, they don't provide voting information or ballots in my community's native language, even though, you know, this amount of people here speak these languages. And then the solution is we can ensure that naturalized immigrant communities can have access to voting information in their native language. And the action for our audience is to sign the petition, like asking the Secretary of State, which runs the elections, to require voting information and ballots in languages that our community speak. And then that's when you would plug in a little petition URL or whatever. And also, you know, this kind of framework comes from this organization called the Opportunity Agenda, which is kind of under which I was kind of trained for communications. And they have this really useful tool here that you can check out. And basically, it's just a little worksheet for you to create your own value-based message. And let's go back to the refugee messaging. Andres, I know, you know, you have a lot more experience with values-based messaging in this arena, so I'll hand it over back to you.
Yeah, so I actually took a look at a couple different accounts and organizations and try to see what type of messaging has been the most effective. Sorry, there's okay, perfect. And so there's already been data and studies been done on to see what type of refugee messaging is effective. In addition, I was looking into other organizations and what their followers online have really gravitated to. So out of that, we kind of created this do's and don't list, where one, we want to make sure that we're uplifting a variety of refugee-led narratives and messengers. We want to make sure that, you know, our movement is diverse. We want to make sure that everyone here is being represented. And we also want to make sure that we're really sticking to our shared value messaging. Some values that I've noticed really resonate to folks has been like values about community, about freedom, and about helping others. We also want to highlight some local stories and take a holistic approach. We want to make sure that we're showing folks all the different types of facets of their identity, you know, any type of contributions they've done in their community, we really want to paint the bigger picture of who refugee and immigrant leaders are in our communities. So keeping that in mind as well. And we also want to paint a picture of the existing barriers that exist and breaking that down for folks. So kind of as mentioned, people already have a mindset before they even interact with our messaging. So we want to make sure that we have that in mind. People will have a lot of misconceptions. So we want to make sure that we're not further feeding into them. Another thing as well is using person-first language, such as a person seeking refuge or a person who is immigrating versus kind of reducing folks just down to refugee and immigrant identities, you know, and also kind of like highlighting the other identities they have and the other ways that they contribute to their community. So with that being said, we want to make sure that we're not using extremely technical terms like refugee resettlement. We want to really stick to our value-based messaging. And we also want to be careful with absolutist language that might alienate folks, since a lot of folks aren't familiar with refugee resettlement and different type of policy work. They might not understand, like, for example, the presidential admissions and like caps. That might be a little bit confusing for them. So we want to make sure that we can kind of like break it down for folks. And we also want to be careful about using exclusive or divisive language, such as nation of immigrants, as this language sometimes does not accurately reflect the histories of our communities. You know, with the nation of immigrants messaging, oftentimes that erases indigenous folks and folks who were brought here by slavery. So we just want to make sure that we're being mindful of everyone in our community and everyone's experience. So the main takeaway I would say is, you know, keep on using your shared values messaging and making sure that we're being inclusive and highlighting a diverse range of stories. And then I'll pass it on we're actually going on to the social media section. Awesome. So, all right, so now you already know who your audience is. You narrow down from this really general audience of it could be anyone and down to, okay, now it's gonna be refugee and immigrant supporters. And you know, now you kind of narrowed it down even further if you use your social media or CRM analytics. You also know your messagings, do's and don'ts. So you're ready to start getting to work and capturing your audience attention. But the thing that we need to do first is some planning. So next slide. Good. So one misconception that people have with running social media sometimes is that they think they're going to run it very similar to their personal social media. And we want to make sure that folks are aware of like the key differences that are involved. So when we do digital organizing, we want to be successful. And in this case, we want to make sure that our toolkit is reaching our target audience. So before we start drafting, we need to consider some of the posts that will be successful and what posts will get filtered out. And part of that is learning about all of our barriers. And one of those things is going to be the algorithm. So we're going to need to plan ahead and learn about the limitations of some of our social media platforms before we get ahead in drafting. And so with an algorithm, if folks are not aware, sorry, one second. The reason why this is important is because most social media platforms have this code that picks which posts are going to be like low quality and which ones are going to be high quality. So that means that we can't necessarily just make a post because it can get filtered out. So in this case, what we're going to have to do is learn what kind of things trigger the algorithm to make our posts either get filtered out as spam or to have them be successful. And in order to do so, that requires a mix of trial and error, but also it relies heavily on us to rely on best practices and use these guidelines for us to be effective. So next slide. Awesome. So for this section, I'm going to go over some of the best practices to keep in mind during your planning process when you create social media. That way it can be accessible to everyone, efficient, and it increase your chances of meeting your goals. So most of us are familiar with social media, but I'm going to take you through some of the common mistakes I see people make, oftentimes in immigrant and refugee organizing spaces when it comes to toolkits. So next slide.
Oops. I don't know how that happened. Sorry.
You're good.
Oh my God.
Okay. So I'm just going to provide a quick overview of best practices for digital media in general, because a lot of what can be applicable to social media can also be applicable to email marketing and Zoom. So some of the common mistakes I see folks in our field make is one is like sending PDFs and other files that can't be uploaded on social media. So just to let folks know, only JPEGs and PNG files are the ones that can be uploaded on social media and even sometimes on our email marketing platforms. So if you send sometimes a PDF or another type of file, it's going to require for it to be converted over using a third-party service, which can be kind of tedious and time-consuming. So if you have a Twitter storm that is starting in 30 seconds and someone sends you over a PDF, it's going to be kind of difficult to engage right in time. So we want to make sure that whenever we're drafting our materials, that we're using files that are going to be able to be read through the programs that we use. So the best practice is always to check the type of file that you have and make any conversions that you need to do before sharing it or uploading it on your toolkit. And as mentioned, this can be also applicable to email marketing. With Nation Builder, PDFs cannot be sent out, only PNGs and JPEGs. So just letting folks know as well. The other thing that we want to keep an eye on is overloading graphics with words. So oftentimes the thought behind this is to include as much information as possible. That way it's accessible to our communities. However, at the same time, it's not an accessible practice for screen readers and for people who rely on alt text. And for folks who are not familiar with alt text basically refers to a description that is written out and that's put on social media, on email marketing, and other platforms and tools that we use. And it's for people who might have sight problems or might be blind. So in this case, when you overload a graphic, you're gonna have to include those 2 paragraphs in the graphic. You're gonna have to include those 2 paragraphs plus some into the alt text. And it really pushes people's devices to overload. So we wanna be just very mindful of that. And then the other thing as well is post with fewer words, so graphics that tend to have fewer words actually tend to perform better. So the algorithm sometimes might sort out graphics that are overloaded with words as spam and may not show that to people. So this is actually the case with Facebook and Instagram. So some of the best practices that we want to use is limit the words on the graphic and making sure that we're putting those words instead to the caption, because the captions on social media, those are accessible to everyone, including with folks with screen readers. So making sure that we're prioritizing that kind of information, the caption is really important, as well as when we're working on, for example, a Twitter storm, we want to make sure that we're not going over our limit, as all accounts have some type of limits. So we want to make sure that it also fits into our purpose. So yeah, just making sure that we don't go overboard with that as well. In addition, we also want to be very mindful about being accessible in other ways. So this is going to be including like emojis, like making sure that we're not using them as bullet points and not using more than 3 emojis at a time. And the reason for this as well is because they can overload screen readers and they can also overload other devices as well. So folks who might have like smartwatches or iPads that read out context or read out text to them, it can make them crash. So we want to be mindful that we're also not affecting our audience in negative ways. So some best practices of these is just, if you use emojis, making sure that you're using 3 or less. And this is also inclusive for email marketing. In our emails, we don't want to overload them with emojis as well, as it can cause similar issues. In addition, we want to also make sure that by being accessible, that our videos also have captions to them. So folks, again, who are hard of hearing and deaf may have a hard time understanding, but in general, folks tend to prefer having the option to have captions because it allows them to fully understand what people are saying. Some of the best practices around that is to turn on closed captions when they're available in the settings. So this is going to be essential for meetings such as Zoom. In Zoom, actually, if you go into the settings feature, it allows you to turn on closed captionings as they were available earlier on. So you can see what people are saying and it transcribes the full thing as well. In addition, I also want to point out that we also don't want to use too long, long links so that it eats away at word limits. and it can trigger algorithms as well to see some of these messages as spam. So we want to make sure that we're using bit.ly and tiny URL links. These are also more accessible as in terms of our email marketing as well. So using that for email marketing, using that in our other digital platforms across the board. And lastly, kind of as I mentioned, so sometimes our content is not accessible for all people with disabilities. And I understand that this is intentional, but we need to think about our audience and making sure that we're really offering the best that we can to folks. So I actually included in this presentation a social media accessibility cheat sheet, which if you were to open it up, it shows you a step-by-step rundown of everything that you can look at to make sure that whatever digital event you're running is accessible. So yeah, if Chris can open that real quick, and then I can show a quick little overview of what that looks like. So with this checklist, oh, sorry. So with this checklist, it shows stuff in terms of like copywriting, which is our like captions, images as well, and videos. And it kind of takes you through it. And it also offers a glossary. So if you're not familiar with what something means, it'll provide the definitions as well. And usually with some of these things, if you don't know how to trigger, for example, alt text on Instagram, you can typically type in alt text Instagram like tutorial, and the platforms will have a step-by-step guide on how to turn these on. And the reason why I'm kind of giving that advice is because oftentimes there's a lot of updates, so it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all model, but that's usually the best practice. With that being said, there's different platforms will always have different features available. So kind of just making sure that we're doing our research ahead of time. And with that being said, I'll pass it off to Chris. Oh, my bad. Perfect. All right, so now that we have some of the best practices down for digital marketing, Zoom, and social media, we're going to go into a deeper dive about some of the best practices for some of the individual platforms. So with Facebook, this tends to be a pretty straightforward account out of them all that we're going to be showcasing today. We're going to be showcasing Instagram and Twitter as well. So with Facebook, some things that we want to keep in mind before we start our planning process is the peak hours for engagement. So oftentimes you can look up like Facebook peak hours in our state or with our audience, wherever they're at, and it'll show us what hours are most often online. Resources and tools such as Hootsuite as well will also tell you the best posting times, and we'll give you those analytics. Other stuff that I want to keep in mind is that visual content tends to perform better. Posts as well, making sure that they're less in character count. Something to keep in mind is that most digital ads that go through Facebook and Instagram, they do have a word limit. So if you are trying to create graphics or captions, social media, etc., that's going to be used in future digital paid campaigns, making sure you have those word limits in mind. That way you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel later down the road. So yeah, just kind of keep in mind that, each platform has a unique purpose and they all can have limitations in terms of videos, posts, etc. Let's go into the next slide. Okay, so with Instagram, there's a couple things that you need to know ahead of time. One of them being that Instagram is ran by Facebook. So you can integrate Facebook and Instagram posts at the same time. And if you do so, you want to make sure that you're following the Instagram restrictions. And then in terms of overall best practices, we want to make sure that we're being niche towards our audience. So using niche hashtags, that way we can get the right kind of followers. So for example, using the hashtag refugee power, hashtag I've seen like Welcome with Dignity as well for asylum specific projects. Those type of hashtags will help us get to the folks that we want to communicate with. Also, like Instagram's algorithm will penalize you for using the same hashtags. So we want to make sure we're recycling through them as well. Some common mistakes that I have actually seen that I would recommend folks to keep an eye on is on Instagram, links, if you make a link in the caption, it does not work. If you try to click it, it's not going to work. And this is because Instagram does this on purpose to encourage you to buy ads. So some alternatives to this is going to be, for example, using a bit.ly link that's very short that people can type into their web browsers, or having that link accessible in the bio, either through Linktree or another service. And in addition, in terms of the captions, we want to make sure that captions are short and sweet, but if you're going to go a little bit over with some paragraphs, make sure that you kind of commit with either going really short under the 125 character limit, or going all the way with the 2 paragraphs. That way we can ensure that there's some unity in our post. And also placing the hashtags in the comments is really helpful. And I also want to make sure folks are aware that we're talking about right now just the posts themselves. There's also stories and other additional things that Instagram reels out. And we're not going to get into that just because this is a 101 lesson. But we want to make sure that folks are aware about those things as well. So continuing on to the next slide. Okay, so Twitter. So Twitter is going to be really big when it comes to our toolkits, because like, as I mentioned, it's really important for organizers. It's used as a platform a lot for targeting politics and also in Twitter storms. So sometimes you're going to see a series of tweets targeting a decision-making body, or you're going to see a hashtag that's going to be highlighting or trending folks to our audience. So some common mistakes I see with folks who are planning Twitter storms is sometimes they'll create Twitter or tweets that go over the limit in their toolkits. So just keep in mind that Twitter has a tight character limit, and it doesn't allow you to post after 150 characters. So the best practice is going to be to use a Twitter limit counter always, because we want to make sure that the content that you're creating is accessible to everyone. If it goes over the limit, people are not going to be able to post it. We want to make sure that we're saving you the capacity as well. In addition, we want to make sure that folks are using the correct graphic dimensions. So something that I would recommend is just making sure that their Twitter size graphics, don't try to mix and match. There's some times where capacity is an issue and that happens, but we try to make sure that we're sticking to the correct dimensions. And also, making sure that we're not spam tweeting, that we are using like threads appropriately and sending information in the comments. In addition, other best practices is hashtags. So we've noticed that tweets with 1 or 2 hashtags tend to have higher engagement rates, and hashtags who are shorter as well tend to perform better overall. And then as well, making sure that our content is short. We want to avoid writing content in all caps as well. We want to make sure that it's in, if you're doing a hashtag, that they're in camel toe or camel case. With these, it's accessible for people with screen readers. In addition, we want to make sure that, the call of action is clear, and that our content also has visuals, because people are more likely to engage. In addition, we do want to point out that controversial tones do tend to have better engagement, but be careful with that. We want to make sure that we're, again, making sure that we're sticking to our audience and messaging guides. So we can go on to the next slide. Awesome. And so we're going to do a quick show right now of some of the tools that we use, including Canva and Hootsuite.
All right. Thank you so much, Andres. So I'm going to give you all a quick rundown of Canva. So canva.com is a very useful graphic design and video design tool that you can use with like minimal knowledge of design or any like graphic design software. So you can, avoid using very complicated products like Adobe Photoshop, which like it's a high learning curve. And you can just like pick it up and as long as you have like a basic intro, you can pick it up, and practice always makes perfect, of course. But I'm going to give you all a quick rundown of what this looks like. So give me 1 second. There it is. So we created this presentation in Canva. First thing I was going to show everybody is the brand kit. So basically, typically your organization will already have like a logo and colors and a type of font that you would use for for your communications, right? And so basically what you want to do is like upload it to this brand kit on the left-hand side of the screen here. And as you can see, we have some logos from some of our kind of campaigns and organizations here. We have some colors associated with my organization and PNA, colors associated with We Are All America, and then some with some of our one of our campaigns, and then the National Immigrant Integration Conference. And as you can see, we also have some preloaded fonts. These ones go with the National Immigrant Integration Conference. Some of these go with some of our campaigns. But basically, the point is that you would upload all your information here so that it's ready to go, so that when you start designing things, it's pre-baked into Canva. So for example, here we were able to choose the colors here are all preloaded. Some of our fonts are preloaded so that aesthetically things that you create always are connected to each other, whether it's a graphic on any random topic, they'll know that it's associated with your information, with your organization. And as people see your logo and your colors more and more, they start to trust you more and more. And anytime they see those colors and your logo, they'll trust whatever information you're putting out in front of them, as long as you're providing good and accurate information, of course. So another part of it is choosing the right dimensions for your graphic. Basically, you can, and thankfully Canva has a bunch of preloaded sizes, so you can create an Instagram post, which, as you can see, is 1080 pixels by 1080 pixels. Facebook post is a slightly different size, and it's not quite a perfect square. Twitter post is more of a rectangle, and so best practices, as Andres mentioned, is the sizing. So you don't want to put a Instagram post size graphic into Twitter, because half of that graphic will get cut off. And same with Twitter, you don't want to put that long rectangle graphic into Instagram, because Instagram will resize it and you won't be able to really see what the graphic's about. So the second most important part, I'm going to just open up our presentation here and just give you a quick overview. Basically, there's a bunch of different templates here that you could find on a bunch of different things. So let's start with a new one. You would search, let's see if they have anything on refugees there. No, maybe advocacy is a more general one. We searched advocacy and a bunch of different templates came up. You can plop one of these templates down, and typically they'll have a lot of different ones, and you can just come in, change the color to match your organization's colors. So let's say We Are America. Let's change it to our font here, and you can just have fun with it. You can upload different video or pictures. Here's one from Basma and Anahita from I don't know where this was, probably the National Immigrant Integration Conference. And you can add those in. There's all kinds of fun elements that you can add. You can add a little rectangle to add emphasis over here, for example, or a little line to take your attention to a certain thing. And so basically it's just about playing with it. You can try different styles of fonts to make different things pop out more, for example. And that's about it. That's a really quick and brief overview. Of course, it requires some practice, but we're just trying to get you acquainted with this just general tool that you can then implement, create a bunch of different content, and then you can begin creating those captions, those messages that we talked about previously, and then you can begin popping them into a scheduling tool such as Hootsuite, about which Andres will be speaking about here.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen real fast so folks can see Hootsuite. Awesome. Can folks see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So this is an example of when I log in, what I see. So this is going to be the We All America Arizona Coalition page. So it shows sometimes analytics on the top. I personally am not big on the Hootsuite Analytics, just because it tends to collect only the information of what you post directly via Hootsuite. So it doesn't give you the full scope of everything. Over here, it's going to be all the posts that have been previously made, and all of these are going to be the scheduled post. You can also make additional little like list over here of other organizations. So if you see other organizations that you enjoy or that you're following, or organizations that like their branding really inspires you and you kind of want to do similar things, you can have all of that on the side. And an example of something that I've loaded up here is, so I'm gonna take this actually and show, yeah, I'm gonna take this graphic actually and show you how I loaded it up. So over here, it gives you the create option. It's a little kind of like compost signal, and you go on post. You can select your social media accounts. So on here, since it is a shared account, we have the different types of campaigns and other organizations. So we're gonna go on We All America and We All America Arizona Coalition. And then on here, it shows us our word limit for Facebook, so it keeps that in mind, and then we can draft in our content. Usually I have it drafted ahead of time. I draft it in like a Google Docs form, etc. And that's kind of like what I plop in. And so it gives you a preview of what it's gonna look like. And then it can also customize a link to make it shorter. So if you have a really long link, it'll automatically shorten it. It's not going to be memorable. So I wouldn't recommend this for like Instagram, but for other platforms, it could get the job done. So this is kind of like what it looks like. And then you can plop in files here. So you can just select them. Here's another different type of file. So you can kind of just like mix things up here. And then the cool thing as well is if you go on schedule for later, it actually shows you what times your audience is going to engage with your post the most. So for example, tomorrow at 8 a.m., if I were to schedule this out, more people are going to like it, comment, mention, etc. So this is really helpful if you really want to make sure that your events and other materials get seen. So that's just kind of a really quick overview. But I hope it kind of shows what this looks like. And then very quickly, the similar thing to Twitter, same overview, same process as well. And it still has the character limits. So sometimes if you're like really short on time, what you can do is you can generate one post and post it across all your platforms. I would only recommend this for text, but also keep in mind that each platform has their own restrictions. So sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. Only do this if you're really trying to, get a message out really fast. So that is just my really quick tutorial on that.
All right. Thank you so much, Andres. Next, I know we're kind of running on our time limit, but if you have time to stick around, we're going to be covering a few earned media fundamentals and how that can both be included in your digital toolkit and then also help create content that you can then plug back into your digital toolkit, namely, like television footage or articles from any earned media that you might have gained. So I'm going to touch on that here really quickly. And if you have to hop off, please, we respect your time. But if you want to stick around, we're going to be covering a couple more items before we wrap up. So I want to touch on basically what we've been talking about up to this point is owned media. It's media that we created, whether it's like writing messages out or graphics or videos. And then, that's opposed to earned media. So media that we earn by our actions. So typically this means, what we typically think is like the media, right? So like newspapers, TV, online, digital media nowadays. So basically we use a press release, a media advisory. Let's start with media advisory. So media advisory is a notice that you provide to media, letting them know that some event or some news is happening and you provide specific information to basically entice them to cover that event. And so it functions as an invitation essentially to media. And so you would send a media advisory 3 days in advance at the very least, maybe even more, to give reporters or journalists enough time to plan to make your event, and consider resending it the morning of your event as well. And we've added a link here, and I'll show you what that looks like real quick, just so you can see the essential parts of what a media advisory looks like. So basically, you add a compelling headline, about what is newsworthy, and newsworthy meaning like it's like new and people want to hear about it. Media doesn't really want to cover something that they've already covered. So, I would avoid kind of repeating the same thing over and over, and try to make it always new, because that's why they call it the news. But basically, you just add like the who, what, when, where, and why of this event, just very top level. For example, like We Are America Advocacy Days, right? And who? Refugees from all over the country, from these organizations specifically. Where? It's all happening virtually this year. You can register here on Zoom. Why? Because all these issues that are impacting, people who are refugees or former refugees and future refugees that want to settle here in the United States. It's also really useful to plug in like who might be available for interview, to entice somebody to come in and do an interview with those people. So for example, for We Are America, I might put Basma Alawi, like our campaign manager, right? Because that's like the top level person in our campaign, in the organization, that is most likely going to catch the attention of any of these media outlets to want to interview. You could also add key details. Sometimes whenever we've done like a protest or things like that, I add like what visuals they might expect. So like a giant banner dropping from like the courthouse, because media loves having like great visuals. So they might, want to go and cover that because of it. But you can also add more information about your organization, your website, your social media accounts, or any other coverage that you've already received on this certain thing. And then of course, like a contact that can serve as the representative for your organization, that can communicate with the media. So a media advisory is kind of like the invite before the event, and then a press release is after the event. So I try to just have something ready to go right immediately after the event. If you're having an event in person, it's even handy to print out a press release, which basically is a longer document that offers like, it's basically like you wrote a mini article about what happened and you have it ready to go for that journalist or reporter, and they might pull out some quotes from there. So, it's like a narrative blended with some quotes from some of the people that spoke at your event or your press conference. So Basma, your quote might make it on here. And then, basically it provides your organization's view of what this event was. If it's, for the Trump administration, for example, like we would put our organization's view of like whatever news happened with the Trump organization, whether it be a policy change or, some legislation that some anti-immigrant or anti-refugee legislation that was introduced, we would provide like our perspective on that. And so, yeah, you basically want to send it immediately after. And usually it's a good practice to have it pre-written beforehand with quotes from your speakers. And hopefully, they would have prepared remarks. So here, I'm also going to show you all a quick, just a template of this. And this one was created by Andres. Thank you, Andres. So you want to create like, add your logo to make it look pretty, the date when it's going to be released. You can send out some of these in embargo, meaning like they can't print it until the day that you put on it. And so you would list it here, embargoed until this date. And you use this sometimes when you want to inform reporters ahead of time, but you don't want them printing the story ahead of time. But reporters don't always stick to these, but that's, if you have a good relationship with a specific reporter, that's when you would use that kind of tactic. You'd put that contact information for your organization. That's going to be the liaison between you and the media. Obviously a really catchy title here that's going to catch their attention. Optional sub heading that might dig a little bit deeper into the story that you're telling. And then you start off with the location. You know, typically, if it's anything related to national law, you know, legislation, things like that, we would just put Washington, D.C. But typically, this is where your organization is based out of and where this news is happening. So you would, you know, basically explain, like, if we go off the Advocacy Days example, I would write, We Are All America held a national Refugee Advocacy Day summit at the Capitol with, you know, 14 organizations across the country, you know, meeting with 32 different members of Congress. And then you kind of dig into it a little bit more, add a couple of quotes from people that might be speaking publicly if this is a press conference, or sometimes in Advocacy Days, you would have a press conference at the beginning, at the middle of it. And so you would pull some of those quotes and add them on here. And then you can add more information around, like, you know, if the public wants to get more involved, they can sign this petition, or more information about this organization available here. And then these three kind of number symbols or hashtags nowadays is kind of the end of the message. It's kind of funny. It's a remnant of like old school kind of like messages on like Morse code kind of thing. But it still sticks around. It's just kind of like end of message. And then you include a quick description of your organization. Typically, this could be like your organization's mission, and then linked with a link to your website. So that's pretty much it for press releases. Another quick thing to take into account is the writing style. So basically, to make it easy for your reporters or journalists to read this, and also to reprint some of what you might have included in your press release, you want to make sure to always use Associated Press or AP style. And I won't go too much into this because it's like a whole kind of style of writing, but I added here a little link for you to explore and learn more about this style and how to incorporate it. Basically, the way I do it is I write it out first, and then I kind of refer back to some of the parts that need to be kind of fixed. So for example, like, you know, states, it's just an interesting little kind of style that makes everything uniform for when media outlets want to print them. So the easier you make it for them to grab your quotes and to reprint them, the easier it will be for them to actually use your work. And that's pretty much it for my section. So I'll pass it back to you, Andres.
Awesome. Yeah, so yeah, that is basically a wrap up of everything that you've learned today. So just kind of like review and reiterate things. What you would do is, you know, find your audience, find what messaging is effective, and then we'll use that messaging to create the captions, talking points, and which is going to influence our social media plan. And then before jumping in, we're going to, you know, get our social media plan ready, do all the planning, do all the prep work using Canva, Hootsuite, etc. And when you're ready to send off your toolkit, what you'll do is you can send in as well. I've seen people send the press releases or other ways of including that information out and including the toolkit linked in there and sending that out to your list. And that way you can have it shared out. So everyone in your network, you hit also like all the journalists and other people who can further spread your message and campaign. And hopefully through all of this, that this will be helpful. And I'm really hoping that folks can now be able to create their own toolkits for their events. I know a couple folks have advocacy days coming up. So if you want anything else to amplify, this would be a good tool to use. So that's just basically the overview of them. Oh, I see a hand raised.
Yes. I'm Patu from Montana. Thank you for this presentation. I liked it. Though I came a bit late, I was confused about the time, but anyway, it was very, very crucial and interesting. I have an inquiry, a request, like, could you please give us either a link or soft copy, even, I don't know, soft copies, how we can get those templates of press media advisory, because Canvas, we can get them, can download them, which is very good. And for sure, I've been noted, I've taken note. It's very good. What you are saying in few minutes, but it's huge to reach out to people and that's the power of media and communication for advocacy. So, and kindly, I don't know, can you provide for us something like link, something, the template, soft copy, how we can get those, so that we, I don't know if you can get even a copy of this recorded training. I don't know, anything that can keep us busy, so that we can we can get used to that, get familiar to that. Then we can make it in one night. It takes some time, get used to that. So please, I guess you want to.
Yeah, definitely. I understand that digital organizing is a massive field. We're not going to be able to teach everything in 1 hour, but we will be sharing around the templates, the links. We're going to share them. I actually created a Google folder, and it's going to have links for the press statement, media advisory, and I made it really easy to follow. That way, all you need to do is kind of like read the instructions, plop in your logo and like your information, and it kind of gives you a step-by-step of what to do as well. And then this recording as well will be available online, and we're going to send people the follow-up, and we can also send in additional notes as well.
Okay, thank you. That's very good. Thank you.
All right. Any last questions before we wrap up? All right. Andres, why don't you tell us about the next training?
Yeah, so the next training is going to be how to organize local advocacy days, and it's going to be led by Neda and Anahita. So if you want to sign up, there's still an opportunity to. It's going to be the same link with Bitly. It's going to be the same Bitly link, which I'm going to drop right now in the chat. So Bitly/refugee power. And as mentioned, there's still room for people to sign up. Information from this recording, we're going to send follow-up folks. So we're going to send this link, the recording, again, mentioned all the templates and information as well. And if you guys really enjoyed this presentation, let me know. Let me know if there's any topics about digital organizing that you want to learn more about, and we can organize a training.
Of course, we will get our feedback. No worries. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Andres. This is very informative. Yeah, so yeah, if we can get those PowerPoint presentations as well.
Of course, we'll get all the materials that we covered in the presentation itself, and all those links your way, so you can review it and play with, these different tools and these templates yourself.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and I hope you have a great evening.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good evening. Bye-bye.